This talk is really about value stream management, and there's a lot of, I think, confusion about it. I think basically it's 10 years behind the time, but that's better than not being present at all. And I don't want to sound arrogant about it, but I've gone full circle with value stream management a lot, and I've been doing it since 2006. So I have a longer history than most people in the agile space, and there's a lot I've learned, and a lot of things are effective and a lot of things aren't effective, and a lot of what's going on now is kind of old school, although it's very useful. I don't mean to diss it. It's very useful, but it's only a part of it, and that's what I kind of want to talk about. So we want to be open to what we're trying to do. You all know me, but I've got this here because this is going to be open to perhaps some other people. So I'm founder of Success Engineering. I was at Snowbird 10. That was the 10th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto, which was at Snowbird. And then just 10 years later, they invited the people who were at Agile Manifesto creation, and some people like myself, David Anderson, people who brought in Kanban and Lean and things. Had been acquired by, or Net Objectives IP had been acquired by the PMI. I left a couple of years ago. I've been around, I've done a lot of things. I've been on the inside circle of Scrum, of SAFe, and of in PMI, of course, because I was there for a little bit in Kanban University, which when I was there was called Lean Kanban University, because I was the one who brought Lean in. The agendas, I'm going to talk about value streams and the types of value streams, and how to do a proto-style mapping of value streams to get a quick understanding of improvements we need. What are the factors for effective value streams? Why and how to start with value streams? They're really, really important, and they're very underappreciated, in my opinion. And SAFe gets value streams about 80% correct. So don't take them as the source of what value streams are. They still have too much attention on the people in the value stream. And the value stream is really about the work and the workflow. And there's a reason that it should be that way. Okay. How to design or approach your own value streams. I'm really not going to get into that too much. This is a subset of a larger presentation where I talk about Amplio, which is designed around value streams, but I will talk about that a little bit. We should have some time for Q&A at the end, but as I mentioned, hold questions about what you might do with this to later if you don't understand, or if you disagree with something I've said, then ask that question right then and there. Okay, the intention is to show how value streams are effective to create alignment and improvements in an organization. You need alignment if you're going to make change. This is an amazing thing that I don't hear much. People talk about aligning around frameworks, follow a framework. No, you got to follow around the business creation. There are times you need to follow, but if anytime you're following something you haven't done before, it has to be done with an intention of learning. And that's also something that's missing a lot. I like to look at the evolution of Agile. It started out with empiricism, and then we added theory to it. And Amplio is designed around value streams. That's an extension of it. It gives you quick start collaboration tools, but enables you to extend it. Okay, so what are value streams and why use them? That's what I'm going to talk about now. Well, consider this. An engine in a car is very important, but you don't design the car around the engine. You must look at the whole, okay? We need to shift from team agility to business agility. And actually, one of my issues with the Agile Manifesto is it's very team-centric, mentions the team something like 17 times, mentions the customer and the business each only 1 or 2 times. It's not the engine that's so critical. That's not even where a lot of the time things are stuck. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. We're still having the tail wag the dog, so to speak. A holistic view is needed. And starting at the team is no longer the best approach. This is Scrum's view. They take the team and move up. Actually, Less and Scrum at Scale and Nexus, they're also team-centric views, just expanded. SAFe even suggests you start at the team level with the essential SAFe, so to speak. An effective team is only part of an organization. You cannot build good systems by putting the components together. It's not how it works. It actually goes the other way. That doesn't mean top down. It means holistically. That's maybe the topic for another talk about Christopher Alexander's way of designing systems, tied with Russ Aikoff's view of systems and complexity. Sometimes it's better to start with a different focus. Okay, so the purpose of value stream management, and there are lots of them. How do you increase collaboration? See where your blockages are. Help identify the source of the problems. See where our workflow is, how it's doing, and try to identify handbacks. Handback's a word I made up, but everybody knows exactly what I mean. It's you get something and then you hand it back to somebody. Well, I don't understand this, or it didn't work. That's a handbag. Get a general sense of how much time it would take to do something if we focused on it. Executives will really listen to this too. If it's a 6-month project, but we could have done it in 2 months if we'd focused on it. If it's a really important project, executives will hear that. So we want to know how to talk to executives. Also, how much time is spent on work itself instead of the delays in the workflow. So we want to look at this kind of ratio of work to workflow. I mean, work being done to delays, since delays indicate bad task switching, which causes less efficiency and wasted work. Because when there are delays, it'll actually create additional work. Focus on the work, not the people. This isn't because we don't like the people. It's not because we don't think the people are important, but because we trust the people. We think they are important. But when the work is ignored, when we don't improve that, then we create environments within which people cannot thrive. And that's what we want. This is one place where I think the Agile Manifesto got it wrong. People over process. You don't want it to be process over people. I agree with that. But just because you don't want it to be process over people doesn't mean it's people over process. Maybe the two work together with each other. And I'm not alone in this opinion. I used to say it's people and process, and Don Reinertson is somewhat considered the expert. And Flo says it's actually people times process. You got to get good environment and you've got to get good people. Okay, educate everyone on the importance of not exceeding the capacity of the people, what they can do, and the need to focus on finishing. Create a systems thinking perspective. Demonstrate why local optimization doesn't always result in global optimization. Actually, when you stop and you look at these 10 things, this is a lot of good stuff. These are a lot of good lessons, and they can all be done with value stream management. They all have been done with value stream management. So this is really good. This is why I'm a big fan. I've been a really big fan. I'm going to go through the case study. I did this back in 2006 when basically eliminated 20% of the work a development team of 100 people, a group, was doing in a couple hours using value stream mapping. Very impressive. We're actually going to talk about that later. I learned value stream mapping from the book Lean Thinking. Okay. Not so much the mapping as much as the thought process behind it. Lean Thinking by Womack and Jones, two of the people who wrote The Machine That Changed the World and introduced Lean to us. Okay. So the first thing we want to look at is what our common organizational structure are. They're typically silos. And when we have this, the intention is to be efficient in each step, just hand it off once. And this is kind of how the work goes, though. But what we are not quite noticing is that this handoff kind of encourages big batches. Silos encourage big batches. It's not so much that big batches encourage silos. It's the other way around. This is silos, how silos work. And these cause delays. Okay, and when you're in this situation, then typically what you're going to do is you're going to check your people. Are they properly utilized, productive, doing quality work, or working on the right things? You hear management talking about this a lot. People attribute this to command and control, but it's actually a lack of understanding of the importance of the value stream. So that's one thing we want to shift. So we're trying to be efficient at each step, hand it off just once, but notice what happens when a mistake occurs, but isn't discovered until here. That means we're working on this faulty information. We're continuing to make mistakes as we go. This is one of the real problems of waterfall and of working in batches and silos like this, as we discover mistakes late. Now, we want to talk about this instead of predictability versus complexity and all that. We want to talk about actionable things we can do, which is how do we discover mistakes quicker? This is feedback. Value stream analysis can help us build systems and workflow where we get faster feedback. That's what we want. Okay. So how do we speed things up? Well, we don't really necessarily want to go faster. Clearly, individually, people are working as quickly as they can. But what if we worked on small items of highest value? You know, and only select them when we have the capacity to do the work. And then we have to also, of course, attend to transaction costs when we have small things. But notice even this would make a difference. Just working on smaller things makes a difference. If this is one of the reasons Amplio effects, or excuse me, looks a lot at what goes into the value stream. We don't deal with epics because they're too big. We don't need the whole epic. We don't deal with features and stories because they're too small. They don't actually create value. If you just put minimum business increments, as we call it, or minimum viable products if you're actually trying to build something quick, but that doesn't work well in a siloed environment. But if you take a chunk of value and put a smaller piece in that when it releases, it'll go through faster, you'll get better results. So the size of the work that goes into the value stream is also important. But let's look at the nature of our work. See, our work actually cuts across the organization, sometimes going up for management approval and things of that nature. But this is one of the disparities we have to see, that we're basically, and we have, of course, several of these things. What we want to look at is, and of course, it's got to go back to time of market. This is basically the value stream. This is what we're talking about, this workflow. And we need to focus on the customer, of course. And value streams start with the customer. I say in mind, because it might not be a request from the customer. A lot of things aren't requested by the customer, but are for their benefit. Okay, but here's the real problem. We're organized this way, but our workflow is this way. This is what I call the inherent problem of development, is we organize one way, we work another way, and we look at the individual people as well. Nobody's really managing the value. Instead, what we're doing was looking at utilization, productivity, work, quality work, and the right things. Now, it's funny, when you look at that on the left side now and look at this, you can see, well, maybe this isn't right, yet this is what you hear all the time. And nobody's educating, or few people are educating management in this. That's an issue. What they should be managing is what's time to market, the ecosystem that people are working in, and visibility of things, effects of upstream groups on their teams underneath, effects of their teams on downstream groups. In other words, if I'm a coach of a team, I need to look upstream and downstream. How am I being affected? Who am I affecting? Okay. Now, here's the other interesting thing to attend to. We know people are busy. Why? Because we're trying to get them to be productive. We're trying to keep them utilized. But look at the work. And as the work flows, there's a little bit done and then it waits. And then there's a little bit more done and then it waits. And then there's a little bit more done and then it waits. Why? Because people are working on so many different things. They're not available when you need to give it to somebody. Now, what we have to ask is, what percentage of the time is our work moving forward? You know, how much of the time is it waiting for someone else to be done? And the realization is no one is managing this in most companies, so we have no clue. So one of the most important things to be actually looking at, we're not even seeing. This is a good time to think about Edgar Schein's comment. We don't think and talk about what we see. We see what we were able to think and talk about, but we're not talking about. We're not thinking about the time the work is stopped because we're focused on the people being busy. So we have to shift what we're looking at, okay? And notice that if you're in this situation, really it's the people are at the effect of it. Now, you got to ask yourself what happens when adding value is delayed, when the work is just sitting there, like between getting requirements and using them, or between writing a bug and it being detected, between two groups getting out of sync. We call these integration errors, but it's really teams got out of sync and then they couldn't integrate properly, just waiting for somebody. Well, what does happen? Think about it. If you get requirements and you don't use them for a long time, they go stale. You've got to redo them. That's waste. If you write a bug and it's not detected, then other people are using software where things are happening. That causes waste. Two groups get out of sync. The longer it is, it takes more time to integrate. When we say causes waste, what it's really doing is it's creating additional work. Now, there's more work to be done. And when you're not attending to these things, that amount of work that now has to be done that you literally created is more than the actual value. This is why asking the question, is this waste or is this not waste, is a silly question to me. There's a whole lot more stuff that's clearly you're generating you don't need to do that's waste. And just waiting for someone means, well, you're task switching. Now, that causes inefficiency. This is another lesson learned, is we're not so much worried about, well, is a meeting waste or not waste? That's a silly conversation. I mean, you're not losing that much time compared to the extra time that you're creating additional work for you to do. Yeah, and cutting down meetings is probably a good idea. Anyway, a focus on keeping people busy results in large batches because it's easier to keep them busy when they have large batches of work. Slows feedback, creates additional work, causes silos, waste, risk, because you don't get feedback. Okay. Again, there's a lot of attention to complexity in the agile space. We really need to attend to feedback more. That'll let us see what's going on. And basically, the more we push, the more we fall behind because we're overloading people. Overloaded teams results in even bigger delays, more work to do, too many projects too large, value delivered too late. Now, the beauty of all this is you can see how much dormant knowledge, as I call it, got that term from Tom Gilb, there is. People can relate to this stuff. This idea that you can only gain stuff with experience is silly. I like, see if I get this right. Will Rogers comment, there are 3 types of men. Those who learn by reading, those who learn by observation, and those who have to pee on the electric fence themselves. So we want to learn the theory, and this is where theory of constraints, flow, and lean can be quite useful. It shifts us from this structure to this structure. It's not to speed up the steps, but to eliminate the delays between the steps. In other words, we're more interested not in doing the work faster, we're interested in cutting out the delays between when we do the work. Okay. Now, this is a conversation I often talk to executives about. So I find an initiative that took place, and it took them, say, 6 months, 3, 9, whatever it is. It took them a long time. And after we reflect on it, we say, you know, if we had focused on this and not done anything else, it would have only taken us a couple months. And I asked the executive if they've been willing to pay 20% more in development costs to have it done in 2 months. And they almost always say yes if it's an important item. But consider if you had something that, say, took 6 months when it wasn't being focused on, and now you focus on it, would it actually be more expensive or less expensive? See, I'd suggest it would be significantly less expensive because you wouldn't have this waste. And some people might say, because, you know, what you'd be doing is removing delays in the workflow, and the maybe slightly extra slack you have to do would be considerably less than the waste that's removed by not having it. This is the key. Yes, people may be less productive individually, but as a whole, you'll be much more productive. This points out the fact that we're not looking for local optimization. So removing delays in your workflow is the key. And the way to look at it is if you got too much work in process, that delays in workflow creates work. This is a vicious cycle. It gets worse and worse. Whereas this is an effective cycle. Work within capacity, get quick feedback, faster value delivery. This is where we want to shift. And Oli Goldratt commented, often reducing batch size, it all takes to bring a system back into control. So we want to take advantage of this. Okay. So what are the types of value streams? Now, there's no right way to say this. I'm going to show you mine. I have a particular reason for explaining it the way I explain it. I'm going to talk to you about 4 different kinds. I forget who it is. Somebody I know in a lean creating visualization book talks about 14 different kinds. I'm not disagreeing with it. But as a consultant, I want to have something simple I can present to management and executives in a very clear way. So that's what I'm going to do. The first one is what we call development value streams. This is where you build products or services that are going to get used. This is the building part. This is what most of the frameworks focus on. Okay. But as you might guess from those 3 arrows, there are some others. They're customer value streams. This is actually one of the things you're building. In other words, if you're building a website to do financial management, then that's the development value stream building it, but the financial management actually has the customer. That's what they use, how they use that, how they go through their workflow. That's the customer value stream. But there's more than that. You typically need operations value streams. These are set up the machines, the equipment that enable the customer value streams to work. Obviously, when you build development value streams, you better let the people who are setting up the operation value streams know about it. Okay. And then there's also just what I call business enabling value streams. That's when you build systems for HR or sales or marketing or things like that. Okay. These three on the right are all called operational value streams. This was a term Alan Ward came up with in his lean product development book years and years ago. The idea of having development value streams and operational value streams is kind of old. I do dislike the fact that the operations and operational sound similar, but that's because operations is about things happening. I can't help it. So operational value streams are things that get used. Operations is one kind of operational value streams. And what we have to remember is that there are also business stakeholders who are responsible for specifying the success. Like this is outside of these value streams. This is a separate action. It actually could be considered its own odd kind of way of a development value stream, specifying what's important to us. I just like to hold it as a separate, what are the success values of the company? Okay. So attending to value streams, though, does a lot more than providing ways to manage them. They can align people within the value streams. They can see the needs of multiple value streams as useful having them. Sometimes you do. How do you coordinate the people in multiple value streams? What are the relationships between them? So it's really just a start. It's not the full things. Okay. So part of the question is, why do value stream mapping? Now I listed a whole bunch at the front. I'm going to show you one of them. Sometimes value stream mapping can be done very easily and simply. And here's a case study I mentioned. When I distribute the slides, you'll see there's a link here. You could go to actually where I wrote up the case study. This was something I did in 2006. It was my very first lean agile development workshop that I presented. And in there, we did a little bit of value stream mapping. So like I said, I've been doing this quite some time, almost 2 decades now. And we had group people. There were 2 people in the workshop from a company that was at the time kind of the elite website building company in Seattle. And they were just known. You go to them, you want a sophisticated website, go to these people. Yet they had a problem, which is why they sent 2 people to this lean course. And the people they sent was telling in and of itself. They had the manager of the project managers who was there, and then they had the director of development that was there. Obviously, they had a development problem because they had the people managing the development projects and the manager of the teams doing the development. And we did a little bit of value stream mapping, and what we had was we did it lightly. We did some timing, but that wasn't the issue. The main issue is we had some step in sales, another step in sales, and then it goes into development. There was this big queue here. That's what that is. And then development did their work, and there was a big queue here at the start of deployment. And what happened is sometimes steps would start to deploy, and as they deployed, they wouldn't run properly on the machines, and they'd go back into development. Okay, now there was a reason this was really devastating. When you get it and you deploy it, what happened is your team would pick up something else. And then when you had to go back into development, the team lead, the best person basically, would have to go and, oh, well, wait, I got to go back and fix this. So all of a sudden you had a team without a leader, without their best technical person. And they were estimating that about 20% of the work they did was because of this loop, because something when it went out to deployment didn't work. And then the lead got off, and then these people worked by themselves on something else. See, because when it talks about this, what that really meant is a person, the lead went back to development and left the other team working by itself. And the reason it kept going with deployment, this were just other things that were done in finishing it. So anyway, so we got this thing, and I'm a big believer in 5 whys. There is a part of the community that believes you can't get to root cause, and I don't know what to say. I can get to root cause most of the time. I know a lot of other people that can get to root cause most of the time. Maybe the word is root is the problem, because you don't have to get to root. There not be one root cause. I mean, you know, if you go far enough back, you'll get to some event when somebody was 3 years old and their mother yelled at them, and now they can't figure out psychological safety. So I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about, can I get to some cause that I can do something with? And obviously we could fix a development to make it more robust. That would have been expensive. Was there something else going on? So I asked him, why is it going back? Okay, so 5 whys is a simple way. You know, some people talk about why, where, what, who, when. Okay. And Taiichi Ono, the creator of the Toyota production system, noticed that you could just keep asking why. So put your 2-year-old hat on and just keep asking why, but go deeper. 2-year-olds just keep asking different questions, or we want to go deeper. So I said, well, why was it going back? And they said, because the machines weren't configured properly. Okay, why were the machines not configured properly? Oh, well, the people doing the people who are supposed to configure the machines were the client at the site. Okay, well, why weren't they configuring them properly? Well, they didn't know. Well, why didn't they know? Because the salespeople were supposed to tell them. Now, at that point, I knew what was going on because I've been in sales. And I can tell you this, when you're trying to sell something and the customer says yes, you shut up and have them sign the contract. You don't tell them, oh, before I'll take your money, before I'll create business and get a big commission, I need you to agree to configure these systems properly. No, they're not going to do that. It's silly to expect them to. Instead, what they did is they buried that agreement that this machine, that the customers had to do the configuration properly. They buried it in the contract. Now think about it. The people signing the contract are not the people configuring the machines. Nobody knew what was going on. Just basically thrown over the fence. So what the value stream analysis did with the 5 whys, admittedly, is it showed us our problem wasn't here. Our problem is here. Now, what was interesting is we finished this course, and then I never heard from these people again. I always try to follow up. Hey, what happened? But no, Al, we don't need you. Thank you. It was a great course. But a year later, you can't make this stuff up. Honest to God, this is what happened. A year later, 2 other people from the same company show up at another Lean course. Now, I've noticed this, and I'm waiting, biding my time. We're going to say, what happened a year ago? So I asked them what happened a year ago, and they said, oh, yeah, they came back from that course. And we had this conference with everybody, all the leads of the company. And they told the salespeople and everybody else what was going on. Because see, in our workshop, we thought, well, you just got to insist. You got to force the clients to do it. That's not actually good either. So the salespeople changed 2 things. Well, they changed one and management changed the other. Management changed that salespeople got their commission on successful install, not deployment. Notice how that gets alignment. But the salespeople, they're pretty smart at their job. And what they said is, oh, I'm so glad you want, this was the procedure when they said they wanted when the client said they wanted to buy the thing, said, oh, we're so glad to have you as a client. Because of that, we've got this sophisticated package that configures web servers to do a better job. And it's a great package. And we'll give it to you for free. And the moment you use it and have configured your machines, then we'll schedule the install for you. Notice how we're being friendly. We got, instead of demanding something, we've actually given them a value add. See, good salespeople know how to do that. I'm not a good salesperson sometimes. So everything's just work. You said, yeah, they went back. It took them an hour to figure this out, and this whole problem went away. 20% of work that had been wasted just eliminated. That's actually a 25% increase in productivity. 100 people, 1 hour. Because people knew where the problem was, knew how to align to solve it. It's really amazing when you can do it the right way. Okay, so again, some things about value stream mapping. We want to remember that value stream systems are also not about, they're not really so much about the components as the relationships between the components. As we saw here, we can now see the relationships between the components. They highlight these relationships. We can see effects upstream and downstream. This is very important. It's less disruptive. Also, by the way, if you look at the whole value stream and now you want to get more detail, you're still looking at the whole value stream. You can add to it. It's less disruptive than saying, oh, we're only working at the teams. Now we're adding portfolio management, things like that. So again, where your problems are. I had 10 before, but I'm just using these. They are all there, but these are three important ones. Where your problems are, use the mapping process to increase collaboration, get a holistic view to see how to create an improvement backlog. Now, there's a problem with everything I've just said, and it's called reality. So here's what happened in my career. So like I said, I started doing value stream mapping in 2006. I was gung-ho. It was awesome. And I did it really successfully for about 7 years, 8 years maybe. But then Agile got into scale. And now you had hundreds of people involved in a value stream. And the problem there was you needed to get a lot more people involved in doing the value stream mapping, more than I could possibly get. Now, I know Karen Martin, she gets a couple weeks to do it, and God bless her, I don't know how she does it. I can't do that. I don't know how to get that time. So what I used to do is if I had to do value stream mapping for a company, I would say, look, give me people, give me 20, 30 people where I get one from each kind of product line and one from each role. I kind of made this matrix of roles by type of product, and I'd have them all go, but you couldn't get good value stream mapping because you had nobody who knew, you didn't have any one value stream where you knew everything about it. You only knew parts of all the value streams. And what also happened is Scrum was on the uptick at this point. And people would say, oh, we're doing Scrum, we don't have any delays, which I knew wasn't right. But I heard that consistently. In fact, when I went into the Scrum teams, they would tell me all the problems they had. So the problem is, if you have to talk to management and leads, you're not getting the true story of what's going on. So this was pretty distressing to me, but I actually stopped using value stream mapping for a few years. I use something else I call a cafe conversation, and that's another issue. Maybe I'll do that. That's a workshop, activity that we talk about in employee development masterclass, and there's a cafeconversation.org that'll tell you how to do it. It's very simple. We have a mural board for it, but that was a way to get everybody at least talking together, but it wasn't as good as value stream mapping. And I realized I was really distressed about this. I mean, I'd had such great success with it. I couldn't get enough time to do it. And then I think it was around 2018, it might have been 17, but it was about that time. I was at the San Diego Open Space. That's when I was living in California. Oh, yeah. So it must have been 2019. I think that's when I was there. Anyway, I'm in there and I get this weird idea. What if instead of teaching people how to do value stream mapping, I put in front of them what I called the idealized, not ideal, because you don't really know what the perfect one is, an idealized, like conceptually what would be great, an idealized value stream in front of people. Could they recognize that they're short of it and then get a transition map of where they are to where they want to go? Now, why did I even think there was such a thing as an idealized value stream? Well, I've done a lot of consulting, and I was the head of a successful consulting company where we had a lot of other consultants who had done a lot of consulting, and we really had a primo group. There were 5, 6, 7 of us who were like really senior, really good. I'm proud to say I was about the 5th best, so I could learn a lot from these other people. And I went to conferences a lot. And I talked to other people who were good, and a lot of good people out there. And I talked to other people who weren't so good. And I looked to see what worked and what didn't work. But I had this other interesting experience that clicked with all this. I remember a 6-week period I had around the time I stopped doing value stream mapping. That's kind of coincidental, but maybe not. As I think it was Einstein or somebody said, coincidence is God's method of staying anonymous. So I was very blessed. Something happened just when I was getting distressed about value stream mapping that shifted my whole view on value streams. And what it was is I went into a company. What I did when I did a consulting, I'd go in, I'd see where they are. I'd discuss with them what the challenges were. I could just from my experience see what they need to do, shorten things, go more to a flow model, things of that nature. I knew flow, lean theory, constraints by this time pretty well. And then I would write up PowerPoint, Word documents saying, here's what we agreed we're going to do. So I did that. And then next week I'm at another client, I do the same thing. And I noticed, this write-up is like 80% of what I just wrote up. So what did I do? I copy and pasted the documents. I took out all the client names or changed it to the second client, rewrote it. And was, wow, that was good. And that took half the time. That was nice. Next 2 weeks, I went to another company. And now what was interesting, I don't remember the order, but I remember one company was pure IT, another company was building products, and a third was building products for IT. And the same thing happened the third time. It was 80% the one before. So I stepped back and I looked at this and I said, sometimes you have constraints of like hardware that you got to deal with. If you're in insurance, you got regulation from the insurance state regulators, FDA regulation. But if you take those things out, if you got 10 companies together, because I kind of flashed back, so to speak, on my past work, most of the companies do almost all the same stuff. From an idealized point of view, they need product management, they need to get teams coordinated, they need this, they need that. There are a bunch of things that they need to do. In fact, this is what started my thinking about building the predecessors of what is now Amplio, is that people need more or less the same thing. What is that? So I realized there was this conceptualized, idealized value stream. And in this open space, I wondered, what would happen if I showed that to people? Would they get it? I got it because I'd got these years of consulting experience, but would they get it? Now, the beauty of an open space is as long as you're legal and as long as you don't lie, you can do whatever you want to. You tell them, hey, I'm going to have this, come if you want. And I put out, I said, look, I'm going to run a series of sessions. That was like 4. I'm going to run 4 sessions today on this concept I've got, where I'm going to show you what I think people should do. We'll see where we're short of, and I want to see if people can understand it. Now, this was a great mix of people. Open space have experienced and inexperienced. So I was hoping I'd get a mix, and I did. And I'm going to show you what I did, and they got it. Wonderful. So what I did was this. I talked about the idealized value stream. I said, pretty much you got to select the value we want to realize. You create some sort of business backlog. You use product management, product ownership to refine the backlog. You have some program backlog now, and this can generate several program backlogs depending on how big you are. This gives you team backlogs. You have implementation, you integrate ops, and you eventually release. Okay. Now, what I did, so I gathered from this, everybody loved it. I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I actually didn't think they were going to like it, but it makes sense. Why? Because they have the experience here. This is like dormant knowledge. They already understood this. I was just saying this is what you'd like to have happen, but this wasn't enough. And I'm going to describe it now to you the way I did it at the open, didn't do it at the open space, but this is what I did. Next client I had, I tried it and it worked. And the next client after that, I tried it and it worked. And it always works. At least it's always worked for me. So what I would do is I would actually get a big whiteboard. I remember the very first time I did this. I said, I need a room. This is when we all got together physically. Remember those days? And I said, I want you to give me a room that's got at least 20 feet of whiteboard space. So they found me this great room. It wasn't that huge, 20 feet on one side. They just had whiteboard all over it. And what I did is I'll back up here. I said, here's where we want to start. I'm saying this is just kind of an idealized thing. And then I would say, and I went through and I drew this picture out across. And I did point out to them we're releasing it. You know, I said, like, there's the customer up here, and that's what's driving all this. But, you know, I drew it horizontally intentionally. And I didn't use a red marker. It's the only real trick here. Don't use a red marker. Because then what I would do is I would go back and I said, well, how well do we do this? And how well do we do this? Or what problems do we have? And if they don't do well, then I say, what are the problems they had? And we just went through this with red marker, which is nice because then what you have is you get, it stands out. These are where our errors are, okay? And then ops is blindside, and then there were some general things across the board. Now, what has this done? This isn't value stream mapping. But what I found this did, it did a few things. It got agreement across people about what was wrong. Not necessarily agreement about what to do about it, but at least now they knew what their problems were. And what you really want at the upfront part is get agreement about things or get visibility on the disagreement. This accomplished that. Now, later, what I realized, actually, a friend of mine told me, he said, oh, this is really important. What you really are doing here is a Pareto analysis of the value stream where the problems are. I'm not suggesting this is enough. I want to be clear about that. This does not replace value stream mapping. But now I don't necessarily need to do detailed analysis of the whole value stream because I know where my problem is. This is a big jump forward in the efficiency and efficacy of the value stream mapping. Okay, so I found this to be very useful. See, the idealized value stream is kind of a Pareto analysis. Okay, so now here's something else I learned in all this. And this comes from something I'd started working on in 2012. Back then I called it the value stream impedance scorecard. And you actually know this. You ever go into a company and you take a look around and you say, wow, this company's great. I'm going to love working here. Look how they're organized. Look how they collaborate. Wow, I'm excited. And then sometimes go into a company and says, oh my God, get me out of this place as soon as possible. They don't get anything done. See, intuitively, you know what is effective and what isn't effective, even if you can't measure it. You at least got to notice it. So I came up with this idea that in the old days, I was like 4 years ago, I used to call the value stream impedance scorecard, because my idea is you could actually look at these and see if you're improving or not improving, but scorecard made it sound too quantitative, and I didn't have that. It was more of a qualitative thing. So I eventually changed it to factors for effective value streams, and I'll show you what also clicked for me in reading Ellie Goldratt. Now, I love this quote. Again, I think I mentioned that 3 kinds of men learn by reading, few that learn by observation, and the rest of them have to pee on the electric fence for themselves. And you might notice the theory, empiricism, and empiricism here. Empiricism is only part of the puzzle. I have to grind my teeth a little bit when I say Scrum is based on empiricism. Well, what isn't that's effective? And what they really mean is empiricism of the plan for product development. Well, duh, of course. But even their theory can be useful. What about the theory? What about the theory that drives development? Okay. A slight paraphrase of Deming is theory by itself is useless. Experience by itself is expensive. And this is one of the reasons we have such great expense in the Agile space. It's expensive because people are just driving from empiricism. And because people don't have unlimited budgets with education, it's ineffective because people aren't properly educated. So this is really what clicked it for me, is reading The Choice by Ellie Goldratt. Everybody knows is The Goal, but The Choice, I won't say it's a better book. It's a different book. It's about critical thinking. And he said, if we dive deep enough, we'll find that there are very few elements at the base, the root causes, which through cause and effect connections are governing the whole system. And this is what I meant by the value stream impedance scorecard, that I had some intuitive sense of and was trying to basically clarify and quantify. Before I could really say what they are, though, there's a little background that's necessary. You need to understand systems thinking. And I'll tell you, Russ Akoff is the best describer of systems thinking in my mind. He's got a talk where if you Google, what if Russ Akoff did a TED talk? It's 12 minutes. Best talk on systems thinking. Of course, there are deep books. You can go to John Gall's work. You can go to Senge's work on the 5th discipline. But basically, he kind of has 2 things here. Like, successful problems require finding the right solution to the right problem. We fail more often because we solve the wrong problem. Trying to get teams to work instead of value streams to work. Our ability to solve a problem is limited also by our conception of what's feasible. So if you don't think we can solve these problems, we can't find cause and effects, we're holding ourselves back. You rarely improve an organization as a whole by improving the performance of one or more parts. Systems are defined by the relationships between the components, not the components themselves. That means that we can improve the team, but not how they work together. We have not solved the problem. Take apart the best cars. Parts of the best cars, put them together, you have a pile of junk. Carness exists in the system as a whole. Quality, business agility is the system as a whole, not the teams. Now, if you step back and reflect on what I've been saying, you'll see that nobody, at least our popular frameworks, are not doing this. Scrum takes the teams, and all the derivations of Scrum take the teams. And SAFe takes the whole thing, but defines them separately. Okay. So here's a summary of these insights. We want to focus on time, not how hard people are working. We want to remove delays, not go faster, continuously learn, avoid overloading people. Most spend time working on work we've created that has no value. Okay, now I mentioned the factors for effective value streams. So if you're waiting for that, I'm not going to disappoint. Okay, factors for effective value streams are derived from first principles. Now, what's a first principle? It's a principle that you can observe. You don't make them up. It's how the world works. So one is delays cause multitasking, causes delays. Overloading people causes delays. Big things to work on causes overloading and delays. You have to look at the system, not the people. I mean, there are a bunch of them. I'm not going to go through them here, but I've got them on, I posted them lots of places, and I'll add that as a slide here, I guess, for reference. But what I've done is I've changed the factors for effective value streams to be questions to ask. Have we identified our key stakeholders? Do we know what is successful? If you don't know this, you're not going to do well. You're going to build the wrong problem. Are we working on the most valuable items to achieve success? So we got to know them, then we got to be working on them. Are people being overloaded with too much work? Is all work in process visible? It includes how it's being done. Are we getting actionable feedback at all levels, meaning tasks, stories, features, minimum business increments, MVPs, whatever you want to be using? Are we building the right product in the right way? Test first, automated testing, all sorts of things. Are people organized in a way that avoids waiting for others? Cross-functional teams is one way, but it's not the only way. And sometimes cross-functional teams don't work properly. Is there attention on managing the ecosystem and not micromanaging the people? Is there a focus on cost-effective continuous improvement? Are leaders, management teams, and individuals motivated? Now, if you do a checklist like this, you can, I think if you just consider this, you can see that almost all this stuff is violated and not even present in most of our popular workshops. Yet everyone is needed. In fact, it might be an interesting exercise to look at failed projects and see how many of these were violated. And I mean, I've done that and I know they're almost all violated. And when we're successful, that was okay. It doesn't mean they're not needed. People just kind of intuited it.